Hello, welcome back. Hope you had a great 4-day weekend. Happy Easter to all of you. We might not have been able to enjoy all the things that the world sees as important on Easter. We didn't get to perhaps go on an Easter egg hunt, or perhaps you weren't able to get all the candy that you wanted or see the Easter bunny. But we can be grateful in the fact that we celebrate Easter for the real reason. That is, that Christ rose from the grave for our sins. He is risen indeed, and we can be thankful for that. This is the first video of week 3, so by this point you should have picked up your packets for week 3 on Tuesday, today, and hopefully now you're ready to move on. Today's plan is that, or this week's plan is we are going to have lessons Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then the test review is on Friday. The actual test won't be until next week, so there'll be 3 videos total that you'll be watching this week. All right, let's get right into it. We've been talking about different types of competition. Last week we mentioned perfect competition. If you're familiar with the characteristics of perfect competition, then you're good to go. Then we talked about imperfect competition as well. Again, if you're familiar with its characteristics, you're good to go. Today we're going to focus our entire time simply on oligopolies. That's how you pronounce it, by the way, in case you were wondering, oligopolies. An oligopoly contains only a few firms. Products can be differentiated or undifferentiated. It has a great deal of control over price. They would find it relatively difficult to enter and exit the industry, and they must always deal with mutual interdependence with the other firms in the industry. If you didn't catch all of that description, don't worry. It's all in the notes ahead. Number one description of an oligopoly is that it consists of a few firms. A question might be asked, is there a specific number? No. As long as it's more than one and less than a lot, that qualifies as an oligopoly. Examples of oligopoly industries include the auto industry, petroleum refining, breakfast cereals, airline industry, and so on and so forth. There are also different types of oligopolies. The first one is called a tight oligopoly. Here's a definition for you. It's an industry in which the top 4 firms account for 75% of the market sales. And then there is a loose oligopoly. It is an industry in which the top 4 firms account for 50 to 75% of the market sales. So the key difference is percent. Tight is more than 75%, loose 50 to 75%. Another type of oligopoly is known as a duopoly. This is an industry in which there are exactly 2 firms. That's the definition for you. And then one more term that we'll define is the word synergy. On page 171, there is a box that I want you to read to yourself entitled Synergy. Please read that to yourself. Once you have finished, we will resume the video. Here's a definition of synergy for you, in case you didn't write it down. Synergy occurs when the total is greater than the sum of the parts. In other words, 1 plus 1 equals 3. Now, I know that's not how it works in a math class, but thankfully for you guys, you aren't being taught by a math teacher, so it works. Number 2, products can be differentiated or undifferentiated. For example, petroleum industry produces an undifferentiated good. automobile industry produces highly differentiated products. And of course, we talked about what differentiated and undifferentiated means earlier last week. Number 3. Oligopolies have a great deal of control over prices. Here's another term I want you to define. It's mutual interdependence. Definition is the most important, not a definition, let me start over. But this is very notable. It is the most important characteristic of an oligopoly. So I want you to star that, highlight that, write that down, do what you need to do to know that this is the most important characteristic of an oligopoly. In some oligopolies, competition drives prices down. You can imagine as one business lowers their prices, all competitors must do the same in order to compete. If Ford was to offer their trucks at a much cheaper price, everyone else would have to do the same because, well, they're in competition. In the auto industry, a firm will try to improve their product in order to gain more customers. Most of the time, Ford will not try to find a lower price in order to drive down prices. They'll just try to make their product stand out differently from the competition. We have this military-grade aluminum alloy that makes our truck better than yours. So that's what they tend to do. But what would an oil refinery do, or maybe an orange plant do? After all, oil is the same. Oranges are the same. How can they find a way to affect pricing? Rather than competing, they might join forces with their competitors. If they agree to restrict production, prices go up, and all firms profit. This is called collusion. Here's a definition of collusion for you. Collusion is an agreement among a small number of producers to reduce input and increase prices. You remember how supply and demand works? The less there are of a product, the greater the demand, or the greater people are willing to pay for that product. In the U.S., collusion of this kind is illegal. After all, the consumers suffer under this activity. But a question might be asked, what if it spanned across national borders? Well, that, my students, is called a cartel. A cartel, here's the definition, is a type of formalized collusion that spans across national borders. Good example of a cartel that you might want to write down is OPEC, O-P-E-C. It is named that because it's called the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. 13 nations that produce and export crude oil form the OPEC Cartel. Their cartel intends to prevent competition among oil producers, thereby maintaining oil prices at a high level. Due to OPEC, they can choose how much or how little oil to produce, and because they are a large sector of the oil industry, it definitely affects the oil prices. Number 4. Another characteristic of an oligopoly is that it is relatively difficult to enter or exit the market. Reasons for such difficulty mostly has to do with the price. There are few competitors because it is so expensive to get into the market. Again, the example is the auto industry. It is very expensive to mass produce vehicles, so it would be very difficult to join that industry. Other oligopolies have few competitors because there are laws that limit the number of firms that can exist in an industry. For example, the Federal Communication Commission, the FCC, limits the number of licenses it grants to firms wanting to start radio or television stations. Simply put, so sometimes the law prevents certain industries from having more competitors. And again, to leave your automobile industry or whatever you're talking about, you would have extremely expensive equipment with a very limited number of buyers out there. On page 172 in your books, I want you to read about corporate spying. Please read that box to yourself. Once you have finished, that's all the notes that we are going to cover for today. I hope you all have a good rest of the day. Be good, do good. Bye.